Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's really dedicated to doing at least 3 episodes a week. I got my booster shot for the Pfizer vaccine. Everybody get boosted. And I'm feeling chills and I had to come home from work and I'm feeling all weird, but I wanted to review the album Holy Hive by the band Holy Hive. Now, I want to talk about this album in particular because I don't think their last album got enough attention. I did review that a couple years ago. I'll include a link to that review up there. I liked the album enough that I purchased it, okay? So I bought the Holy Hive album, Back to You, and a lot of what makes that album great is what makes this new album great too. Primarily what interests me the most is a band that is led by the drummer. Like where it's very clear that the drummer is not only a great drummer, he's producing the music and his drumming, I think the best way I saw it described is a deep pocketed funk drummer, right? So like he creates these great grooves, the great pocket, these great drum lines are actually the anchoring point of the music. Despite the fact there's this great Spanish style guitar and there's a wonderful singer who's singing mostly in falsetto and really quite a nice way. So all the things that were on that album are on this album. Now I should say that it's funny because I have a weird bias, and my bias is against music from Brooklyn. Now, I don't mean hip-hop from Brooklyn, right? I mean, my last review was of Brownsville Ka from Brownsville in Brooklyn, right? But the sort of hipster, millennial stereotype of Brooklyn, probably because I am myself so close to being a millennial hipster, right? Like, you hate things that you see in yourself. So, like, when I read the biography of this band as, like, meeting at a farm in Minnesota, I'm like, oh my God, that's like a parody of some kind of millennial nightmare band, you know? The fact that the drummer and producer describes himself as a foodie. I mean, the whole thing has this kind of veneer, the sort of superficial exterior that I try to avoid. But part of this channel is me analyzing my own bias, that I have against things, and this is a ridiculous bias. Of course, there's going to be a lot of great music anywhere in New York, right? There's going to be great music anywhere where the culture is happening. So anyways, that's a little bit of the thing that I had to get out of my way because this is a really great band that are doing things that I don't think other bands have done or are doing. They describe themselves primarily as folk soul, and I hear that because it is a very soulful band, and it is a very folky band at the same time. The combination of these two elements makes this music always feel sparse and full at the same time. Like a lot of the time, there's only like 3 things happening, like a singer, a drummer, and maybe a guitar, or singer, drummer, and maybe a piano, right? A singer, guitar, and piano, no drummer, right? Usually it's like 3, maximum 4 things happening, but it's just so full and so rich. Sorry. I'm not quite as precise about words as I usually am. Like right as I said that, I felt this whole wave of fatigue come over me through this virus. Everybody get boosted. As you can tell by my thumbnail, I got a little bit goofy with this. I was listening to one of the songs and I thought, wow, they are putting the funk in Garfunkel. Because definitely Simon and Garfunkel feels like a big influence here. I've never actually intentionally listened to Simon and Garfunkel my entire life. I neither like nor dislike them, and I've just been exposed to them, but not really like this Paul Simon part of it, more the Garfunkel part of it, like the nice, strong, sweet voice. At times, as with their first album, they get a little baroque, like intentionally baroque, like the way they sing, the way they choose words, a lot of kind of these and thous, that kind of stuff, but it works quite well. And also it's filling this role. I don't know if Fleet Foxes were the ones who invented this, but the sort of modern folk baroque sounding music, that is a tradition that I like, even if at times it feels a little too precious. The guitar is quite interesting all the way throughout. It's kind of a Spanish style guitar, which at times gives it sort of a Western feel, which I'll get into. Now I'm going to say up front, I believe this album to be superior to their new album, okay? I like the production on this more. I like the increased amount of sort of things happening on this album, particularly instrumentally, with more horn usage. I just happen to like the songwriting a little bit more. I like the feel of this album more. But it's not really a case of a sophomore slump or anything. I think they're just kind of two different feels of albums. And that one's a little bit heavier on the sort of soul side, and this one's a little bit heavier on the folk side. But I'll get into that as I go through the album. For every album, I give you a stamp, a bit of homework for you to listen to, what it is I'm talking about. This is Thunderground Thursday, where I try to talk about music that is less known, you know. Please tell me in the comments if you like Thunderground Thursday, because it's like my views always get, you know, they're fractional with Thunderground Thursdays, but it's part of the ethos of this channel that I have to try to discover new things like Holy Hive. So I'll include a link to the song up there, Story of My Life, which I think is a good example of this funky Garfunkel sound. Kind of an upbeat song. You just hear this groove the drummer is able to set. Homer Steinweiss, I believe is his name, has this nice piano over it. And I think if you hear it, you'll hear what I'm saying about sparse and full. Lyrically, it's all about the idea of an old tiger who is speaking from his cage. I was once out there in the field. I tired of my chasing, but all you can hope for is warmth, small fires blazing. So maybe something of an ode to domesticity, or of no longer being a savage lion, a farewell to youth maybe. Musically though, that's what we listen for. You know, I mean, I love the voice, but really it's just this beautiful piano and drums interacting. There's this very simple, I guess it's a bridge, I don't know, the song structure is not too traditional here. With this piano, it's almost doing a solo, but it's not really a solo, it's just these kind of descending chords, and just gets this really nice groove. And then this bass comes in during this instrumental section, and it's just a beautiful part. Like I could imagine seeing this in concert and just being moved, you know. And then at the very end, there's even like a full-on slight funky drummer funk break at the end. I do think that, given the current state of hip-hop, there could be some good sampling being done here with some of these breaks. But anyway, so there's my stamp. I'm going to go through the rest of the album a lot quicker. It opens up with a song called Color It Easy. The guitar is leading off. I think that's kind of a statement there because the guitar is so dominant on this album. Very kind of simple drums on this song. A few songs on this album, many songs on this album actually, don't have a particularly funky drum beat, which is not what I expect. Then The Story of My Life, which I just described, then Golden Crown, another kind of sleepy and beautiful sounding song, very like deep bass drum sound, and these lyrics about being a king and a crown. I think it's tied in a little bit to this sort of theme of, you know, past glory. I do like how the lead singer's voice, I forget his name, but it's kind of wary here. If you're very good at falsetto, and you know this is true of, you know, of the greats, right? Like, it's sometimes even hard to listen to an entire Curtis Mayfield album, and I love Curtis Mayfield, right? But it can be a little bit grating, the permanent falsetto. So it's kind of a nice change. A little beautiful harmonizing, I assume, with himself, and in the chorus in the second verse. Ain't That the Way is one of these more Western sounding songs, kind of shuffles, beautiful singing that actually reminds me a lot of the Fleet Foxes. And it turns out, based on my limited research, that Homer Steinweiss played drums on that last Fleet Foxes album, which really does make sense. I thought at one point that this was sort of bland, but then the song persisted in the groove that it set. And by the end, I just realized it wasn't bland. It just set this really nice groove. And there's sort of a brief period where I sort of fell out of love with it. And then by the end of the song, I was totally into it. Runaways is a very funky, almost hip-hop stuttered beat. These cool flute sounds. Just for the verse, it's just drums and voice. It's kind of a fun song. This guitar and flute are used very sparingly, but then everything kind of builds up a bit at the end. Some of the best dynamics on the album. Deadly Valentine, this is the just baroque upon baroque upon baroque, kind of an odd time signature, this guitar, and with this ring I thee wed. It's okay, you know, I don't like the baroque mode in general. It feels too affected. But remember how I just said that an entire album of just the falsetto or whatever, like I think the fact that they have different modes is better than worse. The drums seem to be some kind of hand drum in the back here, and these other chorus voices join. It feels almost like a baroque choir at times. I Don't Envy Yesterdays, I think, is my favorite lyrics on the album, just about this theme, about the past. Again, that does seem to be the primary theme of the album, sort of about like youth and aging and becoming sort of stable in your middle ages, I suppose. Another very deeply pocketed drum groove. He's playing on the rim, which is nice. I really like it when the lyrics are direct, especially compared to the I Thee Wed stuff. And on this is, I'd say, the singer's best performance. He has this beautiful extended section where he kind of sings these notes for an extended period of time, has great sustain, and it's quite good. A Wind Rose is in that more Western mode. This is the most overtly Simon and Garfunkel singing that I hear, but again, I'm no expert on Simon and Garfunkel. All I Be Is Where You Are is a weird part of the album where the drums really take a back seat. Like the guitar is doing most of the work. The drums are just doing kind of a simple drum beat that, I could teach you like in a day, And as far as the songwriting goes, it's sort of the most beautiful song with interaction between the guitar and the voice. Like maybe sort of deprioritizing the drums led them to a more interesting place. But again, it's kind of like the Baroque thing. I think what makes this band so great is they can do all these things and mix them up. And it's not that one is better, but all of them together is better. Great Chains has a beautiful trumpet sound in here. This reminded me, like I just happened to look at the credits on here. Basically, every song has, trombone, harp, saxophone, trombone, flugelhorn, trumpet. Okay, like there's a lot of that kind of horns and winds and everything on the previous album. So hearing this trumpet here reminded me that is something that I liked about their first album that is somewhat lacking here. Cynthia's Meditation is an instrumental track. It reminds me of some of the instrumental tracks on the Shaft soundtrack by Isaac Hayes. Everyone knows the song Shaft. It's a great song. But the rest of the album is really good. I used to listen to it when I was in high school. And it's sort of my first experience with a little bit more challenging funk music, funk music that isn't quite delivered to be like instantly an earworm or something that you could like kind of catch and laugh at. But again, get this kind of flute and guitar. And maybe it really is the flute that's taken the place of most of those other instruments. Brooklyn Ferry, we have the singer harmonizing with himself. The drums on this actually feel off. Like there appears to be a disconnect between the rhythm of the drums and the flute and the voice. And I kind of like this mode because it almost feels like they were recording at different times. Circling the Surface, again though, has another sort of deactivated drum line. At this point of the album, I was a little bit tired of listening to it. That could also be the effects of the booster, because I'm tired of talking right now. And then we get to the song Starless, which has this beautiful descending runs through this chorus, sort of towards the end, that then leads into Star Crossed, which is a spectacular ending to the album. Like, this actually happened with that Ka album as well, where like, there's such a consistent mode throughout that to do something fairly different with the last song can elevate the entire project, can elevate the entire album. And that's how I felt about this final song, because the instrumentation right off the bat is very different. It's this kind of old school organ setting on an old synthesizer, just nice variation of sounds, just a very ethereal melody here. The whole album just really ends on such a strong note. You don't believe this will last. Sorrow is joy in disguise. More of these thoughts about like the nature of existence. A beautiful instrumental bridge with the guitar that leads up to this return to the organ sound, and then there's no drums at all on here, and talking about being somewhere in between earth and hell, and these great big sort of cosmic revelations, and then sort of goes out with this nice Spanish guitar. So there's my review of Holy Hive's album, Holy Hive. I'm really happy that they're here. I'm really happy that I can get over my self-loathing enough to enjoy a band that lives a life very similar to a life I could probably have chose to try to live, and I think you should listen to them. All right. My final thing, because I got my booster, and I was thinking about like how to encourage people to do it. There used to be, back in the day, before phones, right? Going in Grandpa Sky mode. You had Walkmans, you had CD Walkmans, you had boom boxes, and there used to be this button. Like every single one of these had a button that said something to the effect of bass boost. And it was always like, It was this like cheap trick that they would always play, but it always worked. Like you'd be listening to hip hop, whatever, and like, here I go, bass boost. Yeah, now I'm really feeling it. That's just a weird thing that we've lost in the digital age, is that button, which did probably very little other than just change the EQ slightly. But it gave you this feeling. It's sort of like that feeling in the guitar, in a car, if a car is like a sport mode, and you press the button, you know, all of a sudden you're Lewis Hamilton, you know? I don't know. Okay, so everybody go get bass boosted. That was not worth it. Okay, I'm gonna go sleep. There's the camera.